The Giaour. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Giaour, a fragment of a Turkish tale, by George Gordon, Lord Byron. One fatal remembrance, one sorrow that throws its bleak shade alike o'er our joys and our woes, to which life nothing darker nor brighter can bring, for which joy hath no balm, and affliction no sting. More. To Samuel Rogers, Esquire, as a slight but most sincere token of admiration for his genius, respect for his character, and gratitude for his friendship, this production is inscribed by his obliged and affectionate servant, Byron. London, May 1813. Advertisement. The tale which these disjointed fragments present is founded upon circumstances now less common in the East than formerly, either because the ladies are more circumspect than in the olden time, or because the Christians have better fortune or less enterprise. The story, when entire, contained the adventures of a female slave who was thrown, in the Mussulman manner, into the sea for infidelity, and avenged by a young Venetian, her lover, at the time the Seven Islands were possessed by the Republic of Venice, and soon after the Arnauts were beaten back from the Morea, which they had ravaged for some time subsequent to the Russian invasion. The desertion of the Manatees, on being refused the plunder of Misitra, led to the abandonment of that enterprise, and to the desolation of the Morea, during which the cruelty exercised on all sides was unparalleled, even in the annals of the faithful. The Giaour. No breath of air to break the wave that rolls below the Athenian's grave, that tomb which, gleaming o'er the cliff, first greets the homeward veering skiff. High o'er the land he saved in vain, when shall such hero live again? Fair clime, where every season smiles benignant o'er those blessed isles, which seen from far Colonna's height make glad the heart that hails the sight, and lend to loneliness delight. There mildly dimpling, ocean's cheek reflects the tints of many a peak, caught by the laughing tides that lave these Edens of the eastern wave. And if at times a transient breeze break the blue crystal of the seas, or sweep one blossom from the trees, how welcome is each gentle air that wakes and wafts the odors there. For there the rose or crag or vale, sultana of the nightingale, the maid for whom his melody, his thousand songs are heard on high, blooms blushing to her lover's tale. His queen, the garden queen, his rose, unbent by winds, unchilled by snows, far from the winters of the west, by every breeze and season blessed, returns the sweets by nature given, in softest incense back to heaven, and grateful yields that smiling sky her fairest hue and fragrant sigh. And many a summer flower is there, and many a shade that love might share, and many a grotto meant for rest that holds the pirate for a guest, whose bark in sheltering cove below lurks with a passing peaceful prow, till the gay mariner's guitar is heard and seen the evening star. Then stealing with the muffled oar, far shaded by the rocky shore, rush the night prowlers on the prey, and turn to groans his roundelay. Strange that where nature loved to trace, as if for gods a dwelling place, and every charm and grace hath mixed within the paradise she fixed, there man enamoured of distress should mar it into wilderness, and trample brute-like o'er each flower that tasks not one laborious hour, nor claims the culture of his hand to bloom along the fairy land, but springs as to preclude his care, and sweetly woos him but to spare. Strange that where all is peace beside, there passion riots in her pride, and lust and rapine wildly reign, to darken o'er the fair domain. It is as though the fiends prevailed against the seraphs they assailed, and fixed on heavenly thrones should dwell the freed inheritors of hell. So soft the scene, so formed for joy, so cursed the tyrants that destroy. He who hath bent him o'er the dead, ere the first day of death is fled, the first dark day of nothingness, the last of danger and distress, before decay's effacing fingers have swept the lines where beauty lingers, and marked the mild angelic air, the rapture of repose that's there, the fixed yet tender traits that streak the languor of the placid cheek. And but for that sad shrouded eye, that fires not, wins not, weeps not now, and but for that chill changeless brow, where cold obstruction's apathy appalls the gazing mourner's heart, as if to him it could impart the doom he dreads yet dwells upon. Yes, but for these and these alone, some moments, aye, one treacherous hour, he still might doubt the tyrant's power. So fair, so calm, so softly sealed, the first last look by death revealed. Such is the aspect of this shore, 'tis Greece, but living Greece no more. So coldly sweet, so deadly fair, we start, for soul is wanting there. Hers is the loveliness in death that parts not quite with parting breath, but beauty with that fearful bloom, that hue which haunts it to the tomb, expression's last receding ray, a gilded halo hovering round decay, the farewell beam of feeling passed away, spark of that flame perchance of heavenly birth, which gleams but warms no more its cherished earth. Clime of the unforgotten brave, whose land from plain to mountain cave was freedom's home or glory's grave. Shrine of the mighty, can it be that this is all remains of thee? Approach, thou craven crouching slave, say, is not this Thermopylae? These waters blue that round you lave, O servile offspring of the free, pronounce what sea, what shore is this? The gulf, the rock of Salamis. These scenes, their story not unknown, arise and make again our own. Snatch from the ashes of your sires the embers of their former fires, and he who in the strife expires will add to theirs a name of fear, that tyranny shall quake to hear, and leave his sons a hope, a fame. They too will rather die than shame, for freedom's battle once begun, bequeathed by bleeding sire to son, though baffled oft is ever won. Bear witness, Greece, thy living page attested many a deathless age, while kings in dusty darkness hid have left a nameless pyramid. Thy heroes, though the general doom hath swept the column from their tomb, a mightier monument command, the mountains of their native land. There points thy muse to strangers' eye the graves of those that cannot die. 'Twere long to tell and sad to trace each step from splendor to disgrace. Enough no foreign foe could quell thy soul till from itself it fell. Yes, self-abasement paved the way to villain bonds and despot sway. What can he tell who treads thy shore? No legend of thine olden time, no theme on which the muse might soar, high as thine own in days of yore, when man was worthy of thy clime. The hearts within thy valleys bred the fiery souls that might have led thy sons to deeds sublime, now crawl from cradle to the grave, slaves, nay the bondsmen of a slave, and callous save to crime, stained with each evil that pollutes mankind where least above the brutes, without even savage virtue blessed, without one free or valiant breast. Still to the neighboring ports they waft proverbial wiles and ancient craft. In this the subtle Greek is found, for this and this alone renowned. In vain might liberty invoke, the spirit to its bondage broke, or raise the neck that courts the yoke. No more her sorrows I bewail, yet this will be a mournful tale, and they who listen may believe, who heard it first had cause to grieve. Far dark along the blue sea glancing, the shadows of the rocks advancing, start on the fisher's eye like boat of island pirate or Menote. And fearful for his light caique, he shuns the near but doubtful creek, though worn and weary with his toil, and cumbered with his scaly spoil. Slowly yet strongly plies the oar, till Port Leone's safer shore receives him by the lovely light that best becomes an eastern night. Who thundering comes on blackest steed, with slackened bit and hoof of speed, beneath the clattering iron sound. The caverned echoes wake around, in lash for lash and bound for bound. The foam that streaks the courser's side seems gathered from the ocean tide. Though weary waves are sunk to rest, there's none within his rider's breast. And though tomorrow's tempest lour, 'tis calmer than thy heart, young Giaour. I know thee not, I loathe thy race, but in thy lineaments I trace what time shall strengthen, not efface. Though young and pale, that sallow front is scathed by fiery passion's brunt. Though bent on earth thine evil eye, as meteor-like thou glidest by, right well I view and deem thee one whom Othman's sons should slay or shun. On he hastened, and he drew my gaze of wonder as he flew, though like a demon of the night he passed and vanished from my sight. His aspect and his air impressed a troubled memory on my breast, and long upon my startled ear rung his dark courser's hoofs of fear. He spurs his steed, he nears the steep that jutting shadows o'er the deep. He winds around, he hurries by, the rock relieves him from mine eye. For well I ween unwelcome he whose glance is fixed on those that flee, and not a star but shines too bright on him who takes such timeless flight. He wound along, but ere he passed, one glance he snatched as if his last. A moment checked his wheeling steed, a moment breathed him from his speed, a moment on his stirrup stood. Why looks he o'er the olive wood? The crescent glimmers on the hill, the mosque's high lamps are quivering still, though too remote for sound to wake in echoes of the far Topek. The flashes of each joyous peal are seen to prove the Moslem's zeal. Tonight set Ramazani's sun, tonight the Bairam feast's begun. Tonight, but who and what art thou, of foreign garb and fearful brow? And what are these to thine or thee, that thou shouldst either pause or flee? He stood, some dread was on his face, soon hatred settled in its place. It rose not with the reddening flush of transient anger's hasty blush, but pale as marble o'er the tomb, whose ghastly whiteness aids its gloom. His brow was bent, his eye was glazed, he raised his arm, and fiercely raised, and sternly shook his hand on high, as doubting to return or fly. Impatient of his flight delayed, here loud his raven charger neighed. Down glanced that hand and grasped his blade. That sound had burst his waking dream, as slumber starts at owlet's scream. The spur hath lanced his courser's sides. Away, away, for life he rides. Swift as the hurled on high Jereed springs to the touch his startled steed. The rock is doubled, and the shore shakes with the clattering tramp no more. The crag is won, no more is seen his Christian crest and haughty mien. 'Twas but an instant he restrained that fiery barb so sternly rained. 'Twas but a moment that he stood, then sped as if by death pursued. But in that instant o'er his soul winters of memory seemed to roll, and gather in that drop of time a life of pain, an age of crime. O'er him who loves or hates or fears, such moment pours the grief of years. What felt he then, at once oppressed by all that most distracts the breast? That pause which pondered o'er his fate, oh, who its dreary length shall date? Though in time's record nearly naught, it was eternity to thought. For infinite as boundless space the thought that conscience must embrace, which in itself can comprehend woe without name or hope or end. The hour is past, the Giaour is gone, and did he fly or fall alone? Woe to that hour he came or went, the curse for Hassan's sin was sent to turn a palace to a tomb. He came, he went, like the simoon, that harbinger of fate and gloom, beneath whose widely wasting breath the very cypress droops to death. Dark tree, still sad when others' grief is fled, the only constant mourner o'er the dead. The steed is vanished from the stall, no serf is seen in Hassan's hall. The lonely spider's thin grey pall waves slowly widening o'er the wall. The bat builds in his harem bower, and in the fortress of his power the owl usurps the beacon tower. The wild dog howls o'er the fountain's brim, with baffled thirst and famine grim. for the stream has shrunk from its marble bed, where the weeds and the desolate dust are spread. 'Twas sweet of yore to see it play, and chase the sultriness of day, as springing high the silver dew in whirls fantastically flew, and flung luxurious coolness round the air and verdure o'er the ground. 'Twas sweet when cloudless stars were bright, to view the wave of watery light, and hear its melody by night. And oft had Hassan's childhood played around the verge of that cascade, and oft upon his mother's breast that sound had harmonized his rest, and oft had Hassan's youth along its bank been soothed by beauty's song, and softer seemed each melting tone of music mingled with its own. But ne'er shall Hassan's age repose along the brink at twilight's close. The stream that filled the font is fled, the blood that warmed his heart is shed, and here no more shall human voice be heard to rage, regret, rejoice. The last sad note that swelled the gale was woman's wildest funeral wail. That quenched in silence, all is still, but the lattice that flaps when the wind is shrill, though raves the gust and floods the rain, no hand shall close its clasp again. On desert sands 'twere a joy to scan the rudest steps of fellow man, so here the very voice of grief might wake an echo like relief. At least 'twould say, all are not gone, there lingers life, though but in one, for many a gilded chamber's there, which solitude might well forbear. Within that dome as yet decay hath slowly worked her cankering way, but gloom is gathered o'er the gate, nor there the fakir's self will wait, nor there will wandering dervis stay, for bounty cheers not his delay, nor there will weary stranger halt to bless the sacred bread and salt. Alike must wealth and poverty pass heedless and unheeded by, for courtesy and pity died with Hassan on the mountain side. His roof, that refuge unto men, is desolation's hungry den. The guest flies the hall, and the vassal from labour, since his turban was cleft by the infidel's sabre. I hear the sound of coming feet, but not a voice mine ear to greet. More near, each turban I can scan, and silver sheathed ataghan. The foremost of the band is seen, an emir by his garb of green. Ho, who art thou? This slow salam replies of Moslem faith I am. The burthen ye so gently bear seems one that claims your utmost care, and doubtless holds some precious freight my humble bark would gladly wait. Thou speakest sooth, thy skiff unmoor, and waft us from the silent shore. Nay, leave the sail still furled, and ply the nearest oar that's scattered by, and midway to those rocks where sleep the channeled waters dark and deep, rest from your task so bravely done. Our course has been right swiftly run, yet 'tis the longest voyage, I trow, that one of blank. Sudden it plunged, and slowly sank, the calm wave rippled to the bank. I watched it as it sank, methought some motion from the current caught bestirred it more. 'Twas but the beam that checkered o'er the living stream. I gazed till vanishing from view, like lessening pebble it withdrew. Still less and less a speck of white that gemmed the tide, then mocked the sight, and all its hidden secrets sleep, known but to genii of the deep, which trembling in their coral caves, they dare not whisper to the waves. As rising on its purple wing, the insect queen of eastern spring, or emerald meadows of Kashmir, invites the young pursuer near, and leads him on from flower to flower, a weary chase and wasted hour, then leaves him as it soars on high, with panting heart and tearful eye. So beauty lures the full-grown child, with hue as bright and wing as wild, a chase of idle hopes and fears, begun in folly, closed in tears. If one to equal ill betrays, woe waits the insect and the maid, a life of pain, the loss of peace, from infant's play and man's caprice. The lovely toy so fiercely sought hath lost its charm by being caught, for every touch that wooed its stay hath brushed its brightest hues away, till charm and hue and beauty gone, 'tis left to fly or fall alone, with wounded wing or bleeding breast. Ah, where shall either victim rest? Can this with faded pinions soar from rose to tulip as before? Or beauty blighted in an hour find joy within her broken bower? No, gayer insects fluttering by ne'er droop the wing o'er those that die, and lovelier things have mercy shown to every failing but their own, and every woe a tear can claim except an erring sister's shame. The mind that broods o'er guilty woes is like the scorpion girt by fire, in circle narrowing as it glows, the flames around their captive close, till inly searched by thousand throes, and maddening in her ire, one sad and sole relief she knows, the sting she nourished for her foes, whose venom never yet was vain, gives but one pang and cures all pain, and darts into her desperate brain. So do the dark in soul expire, or live like scorpion girt by fire. So writhes the mind remorse hath riven, unfit for earth, undoomed for heaven. Darkness above, despair beneath, a rounded flame, within it death. Black Hassan from his harem flies, nor bends on woman's form his eyes. The unwanted chase each hour employs, yet shares he not the hunter's joys. Not thus was Hassan wont to fly, when Lila dwelt in his Sarai. Doth Lila there no longer dwell? That tale can only Hassan tell. Strange rumors in our city say, upon that eve she fled away, when Ramazan's last sun was set, and flashing from each minaret, millions of lamps proclaimed the feast of Bairam through the boundless east. 'Twas then she went as to the bath, which Hassan vainly searched in wrath, for she was flown her master's rage, in likeness of a Georgian page, and far beyond the Moslem's power, had wronged him with the faithless Giaour. Somewhat of this had Hassan deemed, but still so fond, so fair she seemed, too well he trusted to the slave whose treachery deserved a grave, and on that eve had gone to mosque, and thence to feast in his kiosk. Such is the tale his Nubians tell, who did not watch their charge too well. But others say that on that night, by pale Fingari's trembling light, the Giaour upon his jet black steed was seen, but seen alone to speed, with bloody spur along the shore, nor maid nor page behind him bore. Her eyes' dark charm 'twere vain to tell, but gaze on that of the gazelle, it will assist thy fancy well. As large and languishingly dark, but soul beamed forth in every spark that darted from beneath the lid, bright as the jewel of Jamshid. Yea, soul, and should our prophet say that form was naught but breathing clay, by Allah I would answer nay, though on Al Sirat's arch I stood, which totters o'er the fiery flood, with paradise within my view, and all his houris beckoning through. Oh, who young Lila's glance could read, and keep that portion of his creed which saith that woman is but dust, a soulless toy for tyrants' lust? On her might muftis gaze and own that through her eye the immortal shone. On her fair cheeks' unfading hue the young pomegranate's blossoms strew their bloom in blushes ever new. Her hair in hyacinthine flow, when left to roll its folds below, as midst her handmaids in the hall she stood superior to them all, hath swept the marble where her feet gleams whiter than the mountain sleet, ere from the cloud that gave it birth it fell and caught one stain of earth. The cygnet nobly walks the water, so moved on earth Circassia's daughter, the loveliest bird of Franguestan, as rears her crest the ruffled swan, and spurns the waves with wings of pride, when past the steps of stranger man, along the banks that bound her tide. Thus rose fair Lila's whiter neck, thus armed with beauty would she check intrusion's glance, till folly's gaze shrunk from the charms it meant to praise. Thus high and graceful was her gait, her heart as tender to her mate. Her mate, stern Hassan, who was he? Alas, that name was not for thee. Stern Hassan hath a journey ta'en with 20 vassals in his train, each armed as best becomes a man, with arquebus and ataghan. The chief before, as decked for war, bears in his belt the scimitar, stained with the best of Arnaut blood, when in the pass the rebels stood, and few returned to tell the tale of what befell in Parna's vale. The pistols which his girdle bore were those that once a Pasha wore, which still, though gemmed and bossed with gold, even robbers tremble to behold. 'Tis said he goes to woo a bride more true than her who left his side, the faithless slave that broke her bower, and worse than faithless, for a Giaour. The sun's last rays are on the hill, and sparkle in the fountain rill, whose welcome waters cool and clear draw blessings from the mountaineer. Here may the loitering merchant Greek find that repose 'twere vain to seek in cities lodged too near his lord, and trembling for his secret hoard. Here may he rest where none can see, in crowds a slave, in deserts free, and with forbidden wine may stain the bowl a Moslem must not drain. The foremost Tartars in the gap, conspicuous by his yellow cap, the rest in lengthening line the while wind slowly through the long defile. Above the mountain rears a peak, where vultures whet the thirsty beak, and theirs may be a feast to-night, shall tempt them down ere morrow's light. Beneath a river's wintry stream hath shrunk before the summer beam, and left a channel bleak and bare, save shrubs that spring to perish there. Each side the midway path there lay small broken crags of granite grey, by time or mountain lightning riven, from summits clad in mists of heaven. For where is he that hath beheld the peak of Liakoura unveiled? They reached the grove of pine at last. Bismillah, now the peril's past, for yonder view the opening plain, and there we'll prick our steeds amain. The Caius spake, and as he said, a bullet whistles o'er his head. The foremost Tartar bites the ground. Scarce had they time to check the rein, swift from their steeds the riders bound, but 3 shall never mount again. Unseen the foes that gave the wound, the dying ask revenge in vain. With steel unsheathed and carbine bent, some o'er their coursers' harness leant, half sheltered by the steed. Some fly behind the nearest rock, and there await the coming shock, nor tamely stand to bleed beneath the shaft of foes unseen, who dare not quit their craggy screen. Stern Hassan only from his horse disdains to light, and keeps his course, till fiery flashes in the van proclaim too sure the robber clan have well secured the only way could now avail the promised prey. Then curled his very beard with ire, and glared his eye with fiercer fire. Though far and near the bullets hiss, I've 'scaped a bloodier hour than this. And now the foe their covert quit, and call his vassals to submit. But Hassan's frown and furious word are dreaded more than hostile sword. Nor of his little band a man resigned carbine or ataghan, nor raised the craven cry, Aman! In fuller sight more near and near the lately ambushed foes appear, and issuing from the grove advance some who on battle charger prance. Who leads them on with foreign brand, far flashing in his red right hand. 'Tis he, I know him now, I know him by his pallid brow, I know him by the evil eye that aids his envious treachery, I know him by his jet black barb, though now arrayed in Arnaut garb. Apostate from his own vile faith, it shall not save him from the death. 'Tis he, well met in any hour, lost Lila's love, accursed Giaour. As rolls the river into ocean, in sable torrent wildly streaming, as the sea tide's opposing motion in azure column proudly gleaming beats back the current many a rood, in curling foam and mingling flood, while eddying whirl and breaking wave, roused by the blast of winter rave. Through sparkling spray in thundering clash, the lightnings of the waters flash, in awful whiteness o'er the shore, that shines and shakes beneath the roar. Thus as the stream and ocean greet, with waves that madden as they meet. Thus join the bands whom mutual wrong and fate and fury drive along. The bickering sabres shivering jar, and pealing wide or ringing near, its echoes on the throbbing ear, the death shot hissing from afar, the shock, the shout, the groan of war, reverberate along that vale, more suited to the shepherd's tale. Though few the numbers, theirs the strife, that neither spares nor speaks for life. Ah, fondly youthful hearts can press to seize and share the dear caress, but love itself could never pant for all that beauty sighs to grant. With half the fervor hate bestows upon the last embrace of foes, when grappling in the fight they fold those arms that ne'er shall lose their hold. Friends meet to part, love laughs at faith, true foes once met are joined till death. With sabre shivered to the hilt, yet dripping with the blood he spilt, yet stained within the severed hand which quivers round that faithless brand, his turban far behind him rolled, and cleft in twain its firmest fold, his flowing robe by falchion torn, and crimson as those clouds of morn that streaked with dusky red portend the day shall have a stormy end. A stain on every bush that bore a fragment of his palum poor, his breast with wounds unnumbered riven, his back to earth, his face to heaven. Fallen Hassan lies, his unclosed eye yet glowering on the enemy, as if the hour that sealed his fate surviving left his quenchless hate, and o'er him bends that foe with brow as dark as his that bled below. Yes, Lila sleeps beneath the wave, but his shall be a redder grave. Her spirit pointed well the steel which taught that felon heart to feel. He called the prophet, but his power was vain against the vengeful Giaour. He called on Allah, but the word arose unheeded or unheard. Thou Paynim fool, could Lila's prayer be passed and thine accorded there? I watched my time, I leagued with these, the traitor in his turn to seize. My wrath is wrecked, the deed is done, and now I go, but go alone. The browsing camel's bells are tinkling. His mother looked from her lattice high. She saw the dews of eve besprinkling the pasture green beneath her eye. She saw the planets faintly twinkling. 'Tis twilight, sure his train is nigh. She could not rest in the garden bower, but gazed through the grate of his steepest tower. Why comes he not? His steeds are fleet, nor shrink they from the summer heat. Why sends not the bridegroom his promised gift? Is his heart more cold or his barb less swift? O false reproach, yon Tartar now has gained our nearest mountain's brow, and warily the steep descends, and now within the valley bends, and he bears the gift at his saddle bow. How could I deem his courser slow? Right well my largesse shall repay his welcome speed and weary way. The Tartar lighted at the gate, but scarce upheld his fainting weight. His swarthy visage spake distress, but this might be from weariness. His garb with sanguine spots was dyed, but these might be from his courser's side. He drew the token from his vest. Angel of death, 'tis Hassan's cloven crest. His cowpack rent, his caftan red. Lady, a fearful bride thy son hath wed. Me not from mercy did they spare, but this empurpled pledge to bear. Peace to the brave whose blood is spilt, woe to the Giaour, for his the guilt. A turban carved in coarsest stone, a pillar with rank weeds o'ergrown, whereon can now be scarcely read the Koran verse that mourns the dead. Point out the spot where Hassan fell, a victim in that lonely dell. There sleeps as true an Osmanli as e'er at Mecca bent the knee, as ever scorned forbidden wine, or prayed with face towards the shrine, in orisons resumed anew, at solemn sound of Allahu. Yet died he by a stranger's hand, and stranger in his native land. Yet died he as in arms he stood, and unavenged, at least in blood. But him the maids of paradise impatient to their halls invite, and the dark heaven of Houri's eyes on him shall glance for ever bright. They come, their kerchiefs green they wave, and welcome with a kiss the brave, who falls in battle 'gainst a Giaour, is worthiest an immortal bower. But thou, false infidel, shalt writhe beneath avenging Monkir's scythe, and from its torment 'scape alone, to wander round lost Eblis' throne, and fire unquenched, unquenchable, around within thy heart shall dwell. Nor ear can hear, nor tongue can tell the tortures of that inward hell. But first on earth as vampire sent, thy corse shall from its tomb be rent, then ghastly haunt thy native place, and suck the blood of all thy race. There from thy daughter, sister, wife, at midnight drain the stream of life, yet loathe the banquet which perforce must feed thy livid living corse. Thy victims ere they yet expire shall know the demon for their sire, as cursing thee, thou cursing them, thy flowers are withered on the stem. But one that for thy crime must fall, the youngest, most beloved of all, shall bless thee with a father's name. That word shall wrap thy heart in flame, yet must thou end thy task and mark her cheek's last tinge, her eyes' last spark, and the last glassy glance must view, which freezes o'er its lifeless blue. Then with unhallowed hand shalt tear the tresses of her yellow hair, of which in life a lock when shorn affection's fondest pledge was worn, but now is borne away by thee, memorial of thine agony. Wet with thine own best blood shall drip thy gnashing tooth and haggard lip, then stalking to thy sullen grave, go and with ghouls and afrits rave, till these in horror shrink away from spectre more accursed than they. How name ye yon lone Calour? His features I have scanned before. In mine own land 'tis many a year since dashing by the lonely shore, I saw him urge as fleet a steed as ever served a horseman's need. But once I saw that face, yet then it was so marked with inward pain, I could not pass it by again. It breathes the same dark spirit now, as death were stamped upon his brow. 'Tis twice 3 years at summer tide since first among our freres he came, and here it soothes him to abide, for some dark deed he will not name. But never at our vesper prayer, nor ere before confession chair, kneels he nor recks he when arise incense or anthem to the skies, but broods within his cell alone, his faith and race alike unknown. The sea from Paynim land he crossed, and here ascended from the coast, yet seems he not of Othman race, but only Christian in his face. I'd judge him some stray renegade, repentant of the change he made, save that he shuns our holy shrine, nor tastes the sacred bread and wine. Great largesse to these walls he brought, and thus our abbot's favour bought. But were I prior, not a day should brook such strangers' further stay, or pent within our penance cell, should doom him there for aye to dwell. Much in his visions mutters he of maiden whelmed beneath the sea, of sabres clashing, foemen flying, wrongs avenged, and Moslem dying. On cliff he hath been known to stand, and rave as to some bloody hand, fresh severed from its parent limb, invisible to all but him, which beckons onward to his grave, and lures to leap into the wave. Dark and unearthly is the scowl that glares beneath his dusky cowl. The flash of that dilating eye reveals too much of times gone by. Though varying indistinct its hue, oft will his glance the gazer rue, for in it lurks that nameless spell, which speaks itself unspeakable, a spirit yet unquelled and high, that claims and keeps ascendancy, and like the bird whose pinions quake but cannot fly the gazing snake, will others quail beneath his look, nor scape the glance they scarce can brook. From him the half-affrighted friar, when met alone, would fain retire, as if that eye and bitter smile transferred to others fear and guile. Not oft to smile descendeth he, and when he doth 'tis sad to see that he but mocks at misery, How that pale lip will curl and quiver, then fix once more as if forever, as if his sorrow or disdain forbade him e'er to smile again. Well were it so, such ghastly mirth from joyance ne'er derived its birth. But sadder still it were to trace what once were feelings in that face. Time hath not yet the features fixed, but brighter traits with evil mixed. And there are hues not always faded, which speak a mind not all degraded, even by the crimes through which it waded. The common crowd but see the gloom of wayward deeds and fitting doom. The close observer can espy a noble soul and lineage high. Alas, though both bestowed in vain, which grief could change and guilt could stain, it was no vulgar tenement to which such lofty gifts were lent. And still, with little less than dread, on such the sight is riveted. The roofless cot, decayed and rent, will scarce delay the passer by. The tower by war or tempest bent, while yet may frown one battlement, demands and daunts the stranger's eye. Each ivied arch and pillar lone pleads haughtily for glories gone. His floating robe around him folding, slow sweeps he through the columned aisle, with dread beheld, with gloom beholding the rites that sanctify the pile. But when the anthem shakes the choir, and kneel the monks, his steps retire. By yonder lone and wavering torch his aspect glares within the porch. There will he pause till all is done, and hear the prayer, but utter none. See by the half-illumined wall his hood fly back, his dark hair fall, that pale brow wildly wreathing round, as if the Gorgon there had bound the sablest of the serpent braid that o'er her fearful forehead strayed. For he declines the convent oath, and leaves those locks unhallowed growth, but wears our garb in all beside, and not from piety but pride gives wealth to walls that never heard of his one holy vow nor word. Lo, mark ye, as the harmony peals louder praises to the sky, that livid cheek, that stony air of mixed defiance and despair. Saint Francis keep him from the shrine, else may we dread the wrath divine made manifest by awful sign. If ever evil angel bore the form of mortal, such he wore. By all my hope of sins forgiven, such looks are not of earth nor heaven. To love the softest hearts are prone, but such can ne'er be all his own. Too timid in his woes to share, too meek to meet or brave despair, and sterner hearts alone may feel the wound that time can never heal. The rugged metal of the mine must burn before its surface shine, but plunged within the furnace flame, it bends and melts, though still the same. Then tempered to thy want or will, 'twill serve thee to defend or kill. A breastplate for thine hour of need, or blade to bid thy foeman bleed. But if a dagger's form it bear, let those who shape its edge beware. Thus passion's fire and woman's art can turn and tame the sterner heart. From these its form and tone are ta'en, and what they make it must remain, but break before it bend again. If solitude succeed to grief, release from pain is slight relief. The vacant bosom's wilderness might thank the pang that made it less. We loathe what none are left to share, even bliss 'twere woe alone to bear. The heart once thus left desolate must fly at last for ease to hate. It is as if the dead could feel the icy worm around them steal, and shudder as the reptiles creep to revel o'er their rotting sleep, without the power to scare away the cold consumers of their clay. It is as if the desert bird, whose beak unlocks her bosom's stream, to still her famished nestlings scream, nor mourns a life to them transferred, should rend her rash devoted breast, and find them flown her empty nest. The keenest pangs the wretched find are rapture to the dreary void, the leafless desert of the mind, the waste of feelings unemployed. Who would be doomed to gaze upon a sky without a cloud or sun, less hideous far the tempest's roar, than ne'er to brave the billows more, thrown when the war of winds is o'er, a lonely wreck on Fortune's shore, mid sullen calm and silent bay, unseen to drop by dull decay, better to sink beneath the shock than moulder piecemeal on the rock. Father, thy days have passed in peace, mid counted beads and countless prayer, to bid the sins of others cease, thyself without a crime or care, save transient ills that all must bear, has been thy lot from youth to age, and thou wilt bless thee from the rage of passions fierce and uncontrolled, such as thy penitents unfold, whose secret sins and sorrows rest within thy pure and pitying breast. My days, though few, have passed below in much of joy, but more of woe, yet still in hours of love or strife I've scaped the weariness of life, now leagued with friends, now girt by foes. I loathed the languor of repose, now nothing left to love or hate, no more with hope or pride elate. I'd rather be the thing that crawls most noxious o'er a dungeon's walls, than pass my dull unvarying days condemned to meditate and gaze. Yet lurks a wish within my breast for rest, but not to feel 'tis rest. Soon shall my fate that wish fulfill, and I shall sleep without the dream of what I was and would be still. Dark as to thee my deeds may seem, my memory now is but the tomb of joys long dead, my hope their doom. Though better to have died with those than bear a life of lingering woes, my spirit shrunk not to sustain the searching throes of ceaseless pain, nor sought the self-accorded grave of ancient fool and modern knave. Yet death I have not feared to meet, and in the field it had been sweet, had danger wooed me on to move, the slave of glory, not of love. I've braved it not for honor's boast, I smile at laurels won or lost. To such let others carve their way, for high renown or hireling pay, but place again before my eyes aught that I deem a worthy prize, the maid I love, the man I hate, and I will hunt the steps of fate, to save or slay as these require, through rending steel and rolling fire. Nor needst thou doubt this speech from one who would but do what he hath done. Death is but what the haughty brave, the weak must bear, the wretch must crave. Then let life go to him who gave. I have not quailed to danger's brow, when high and happy need I now? I loved her, friar, nay adored, but these are words that all can use. I proved it more in deed than word. There's blood upon that dinted sword, a stain its steel can never lose. 'Twas shed for her who died for me, it warmed the heart of one abhorred. Nay, start not, no, nor bend thy knee, nor midst my sins such act record. Thou wilt absolve me from the deed, for he was hostile to thy creed. The very name of Nazarene was wormwood to his Paynim spleen. Ungrateful fool, since but for brands well wielded in some hardy hands, and wounds by Galileans given, the surest pass to Turkish heaven. For him his houris still might wait, impatient at the prophet's gate. I loved her, love will find its way through paths where wolves would fear to prey. And if it dares enough, 'twere hard if passion met not some reward. No matter how, or where, or why, I did not vainly seek nor sigh, yet sometimes with remorse in vain I wish she had not loved again. She died, I dare not tell thee how, but look, 'tis written on my brow. There read of Cain the curse and crime, in characters unworn by time. Still ere thou dost condemn me, pause. Not mine the act, though I the cause. Yet did he but what I had done, had she been false to more than one. Faithless to him he gave the blow, but true to me I laid him low. Howe'er deserved her doom might be, her treachery was truth to me. To me she gave her heart, that all which tyranny can ne'er enthrall, and I, alas, too late to save, Yet all I then could give, I gave. 'Twas some relief, our foe a grave. His death sits lightly, but her fate has made me what thou well mayst hate. His doom was sealed, he knew it well, warned by the voice of stern Tahir, deep in whose darkly boding ear the death shot pealed of murder near. As filed the troop to where they fell, he died too in the battle broil. A time that heeds nor pain nor toil, one cry to Mahomet for aid, one prayer to Allah, all he made. He knew and crossed me in the fray. I gazed upon him where he lay, and watched his spirit ebb away. Though pierced like pard by hunter's steel, he felt not half that now I feel. I searched, but vainly searched, to find the workings of a wounded mind. Each feature of that sullen course betrayed his rage, but no remorse. Oh, what had vengeance given to trace despair upon his dying face? The late repentance of that hour, when penitence hath lost her power to tear one terror from the grave, and will not soothe, and cannot save. The cold in clime are cold in blood, their love can scarce deserve the name, but mine was like the lava flood that boils in Etna's breast of flame. I cannot prate in fueling strain of lady love and beauty's chain, if changing cheek and scorching vein, lips taught to writhe but not complain, if bursting heart and maddening brain, and daring deed and vengeful steel, and all that I have felt and feel betoken love, that love was mine, and shown by many a bitter sign. 'Tis true, I could not whine nor sigh, I knew but to obtain or die. I die, but first I have possessed, and come what may, I have been blessed. Shall I the doom I sought upbraid? No, reft of all, yet undismayed. But for the thought of Leila slain, give me the pleasure with the pain, so would I live and love again. I grieve, but not, my holy guide, for him who dies, but her who died. She sleeps beneath the wandering wave. Ah, had she but an earthly grave, this breaking heart and throbbing head should seek and share her narrow bed. She was a form of life and light, that seen became a part of sight, and rose where'er I turned mine eye, the morning star of memory. Yes, love indeed is light from heaven, a spark of that immortal fire, with angels shared, by Allah given, to lift from earth our low desire. Devotion wafts the mind above, but heaven itself descends in love. A feeling from the Godhead caught, to wean from self each sordid thought, a ray of him who formed the whole, a glory circling round the soul. I grant my love imperfect all, that mortals by the name miscall. Then deem it evil, what thou wilt, but say, oh say, hers was not guilt. She was my life's unerring light, that quenched what beam shall break my night. Oh, would it shone to lead me still, although to death or deadliest ill. Why marvel ye, if they who lose this present joy, this future hope, no more with sorrow meekly cope? In frenzy then their fate accuse, in madness do those fearful deeds that seem to add but guilt to woe. Alas, the breast that inly bleeds hath naught to dread from outward blow. Who falls from all he knows of bliss cares little into what abyss. Fierce as the gloomy vultures now, to thee, old man, my deeds appear. I read abhorrence on thy brow, and this too I was born to bear. 'Tis true that like the bird of prey, with havoc have I marked my way, but this was taught me by the dove, to die, and know no second love. This lesson yet hath man to learn, taught by the thing he dares to spurn, the bird that sings within the brake, the swan that swims upon the lake. One mate and one alone will take, and let the fool still prone to range, and sneer on all who cannot change, partake his jest with boasting boys. I envy not his varied joys, but deem such feeble heartless man less than yon solitary swan. Far, far beneath the shallow maid he left believing and betrayed. Such shame at least was never mine. Lila, each thought was only thine. My good, my guilt, my weal, my woe, my hope on high, my all below. Earth holds no other like to thee, or if it doth, in vain for me. For worlds I dare not view the dame resembling thee, yet not the same. The very crimes that mar my youth, this bed of death attest my truth. 'Tis all too late. Thou wert, thou art, the cherished madness of my heart. And she was lost, and yet I breathed, but not the breath of human life. A serpent round my heart was wreathed, and stung my every thought to strife. Alike all time, abhorred all place, shuddering I shrunk from nature's face, where every hue that charmed before the blackness of my bosom wore. The rest thou dost already know, and all my sins, and half my woe. But talk no more of penitence, thou seest I soon shall part from hence. And if thy holy tale were true, the deed that's done canst thou undo? Think me not thankless, but this grief looks not to priesthood for relief. My soul's estate in secret guess, but wouldst thou pity more, say less. When thou canst bid my Lila live, then will I sue thee to forgive. Then plead my cause in that high place, where purchased masses proffer grace. Go when the hunter's hand hath wrung from forest cave her shrieking young, and calm the lonely lioness, but soothe not, mock not my distress. In earlier days and calmer hours, when heart with heart delights to blend, where bloom my native valley's bowers, I had, have I now, a friend. To him this pledge I charge thee send, memorial of a youthful vow. I would remind him of my end. Though souls absorbed like mine allow brief thought to distant friendships claim, yet dear to him my blighted name. 'Tis strange, he prophesied my doom, and I have smiled. I then could smile, when prudence would his voice assume, and warn, I recked not what, the while. But now remembrance whispers o'er those accents scarcely marked before. Say that his bodings came to pass, and he will start to hear their truth, and wish his words had not been sooth. Tell him, unheeding as I was, through many a busy bitter scene, of all our golden youth had been, in pain my faltering tongue had tried to bless his memory ere I died. But heaven in wrath would turn away if guilt should for the guiltless pray. I do not ask him not to blame, too gentle he to wound my name. And what have I to do with fame? I do not ask him not to mourn, such cold request might sound like scorn. And what than friendship's manly tear may better grace a brother's bier? But bear this ring, his own of old, and tell him what thou dost behold, the withered frame, the ruined mind, the rack by passion left behind, a shriveled scroll, a scattered leaf, seared by the autumn blast of grief. Tell me no more of fancy's gleam. No, father, no, 'twas not a dream. Alas, the dreamer first must sleep. I only watched, and wished to weep, but could not, for my burning brow throbbed to the very brain, as now. I wished but for a single tear, as something welcome, new and dear. I wished it then, I wish it still. Despair is stronger than my will. Waste not thine orison. Despair is mightier than thy pious prayer. I would not, if I might, be blessed. I want no paradise but rest. 'Twas then, I tell thee, father, then I saw her. Yes, she lived again, and shining in her white simar, as through yon pale grey cloud the star, which now I gaze on as on her, who looked and looks far lovelier. Dimly I view its trembling spark. Tomorrow's night shall be more dark, and I before its rays appear, that lifeless thing, the living fear. I wander, father, for my soul is fleeting towards the final goal. I saw her, friar, and I rose forgetful of our former woes. and rushing from my couch I dart, and clasp her to my desperate heart. I clasp, but what is it that I clasp? No breathing form within my grasp, no heart that beats reply to mine. Yet Lila, yet the form is thine, and art thou, dearest, changed so much as meet my eye, yet mock my touch? Ah, were thy beauties e'er so cold, I care not, so my arms enfold the all they ever wished to hold. Alas, around a shadow pressed, they shrink upon my lonely breast. Yet still 'tis there, in silence stands and beckons with beseeching hands, with braided hair and bright black eye. I knew 'twas false, she could not die, but he is dead within the dell. I saw him buried where he fell. He comes not, for he cannot break from earth. Why then art thou awake? They told me wild waves rolled above the face I view, the form I love. They told me 'twas a hideous tale. I'd tell it, but my tongue would fail. If true, and from thine ocean cave thou comest to claim a calmer grave, oh, pass thy dewy fingers o'er this brow that then will burn no more, or place them on my hopeless heart. But shape or shade, whate'er thou art, in mercy ne'er again depart, or farther with thee bear my soul than winds can waft or waters roll. Such is my name, and such my tale. Confessor, to thy secret ear I breathe the sorrows I bewail, and thank thee for the generous tear this glazing eye could never shed. Then lay me with the humblest dead, and save the cross above my head. Be neither name nor emblem spread by prying stranger to be read, or stay the passing pilgrim's tread. He passed, nor of his name and race hath left a token or a trace, save what the Father must not say who shrived him on his dying day. This broken tale was all we knew of her he loved, or him he slew. End of The Giaour by George Gordon, Lord Byron.
Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 1 to 11. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Antipodean Writer at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 1 to 11. Stanza 1. Many a vanished year and age, and tempest's breath and battle's rage have swept over Corinth, yet she stands, a fortress formed to freedom's bands. The whirlwind's wrath, the earthquake's shock, have left untouched her hoary rock, the keystone of a land which still, though fallen, looks proudly on that hill, the landmark to the double tide that purpling rolls on either side, as if their waters chafed to meet, yet pause and crouch beneath her feet. But could the blood before her shed, since first Timoleon's brother bled, or baffled Persia's despot fled, arise from out the earth which drank the stream of slaughter as it sank, that sanguine ocean would overflow her isthmus idly spread below? Or could the bones of all the slain who perished there be piled again, that rival pyramid would rise more mountain-like through those clear skies than yon tower-capped Acropolis, which seems the very clouds to kiss? Stanza 2. On Dun Citharon's ridge appears the gleam of twice 10,000 spears, and downward to the Isthmian plain, from shore to shore of either main, the tent is pitched, the crescent shines along the Moslems' leaguering lines, and the dusk Spahis' bands advance beneath each bearded Pasha's glance, and far and wide as eye can reach, the turbaned cohorts throng the beach, and there the Arab's camel kneels, and there his steed the Tartar wheels. The Turcoman hath left his herd, the sabre round his loins to gird, and there the volleying thunders pour, till waves grow smoother to the roar. The trench is dug, the cannon's breath wings the far hissing globe of death. Fast whirl the fragments from the wall, which crumbles with the ponderous ball, and from that wall the foe replies, over dusty plain and smoky skies, with fires that answer fast and well the summons of the infidel. Stanza 3. But near and nearest to the wall of those who wish and work its fall, with deeper skill in war's black art than Othman's sons, and high of heart as any chief that ever stood triumphant in the fields of blood, from post to post and deed to deed, fast spurring on his reeking steed, where sallying ranks the trench assail, and make the foremost Moslem quail, or where the battery guarded well remains as yet impregnable, alighting cheerly to inspire the soldier slackening in his fire, the first and freshest of the host, which Stambul's Sultan there can boast, to guide the follower over the field, to point the tube, the lance to wield, or whirl around the bickering blade, was Alp, the Adrian renegade. Stanza 4. From Venice, once a race of worth, his gentle sires, he drew his birth, but late an exile from her shore. Against his countrymen he bore the arms they taught to bear, and now the turban girt his shaven brow. Through many a change had Corinth passed, with Greece to Venice rule at last, and here before her walls, with those to Greece and Venice equal foes, he stood a foe with all the zeal which young and fiery converts feel, within whose heated bosom throngs the memory of 1,000 wrongs. To him had Venice ceased to be her ancient civic boast, the free, and in the palace of St. Mark unnamed accusers in the dark within the lion's mouth had placed a charge against him uneffaced. He fled in time and saved his life, to waste his future years in strife, that taught his land how great her loss in him who triumphed over the cross, 'gainst which he reared the crescent high, and battled to avenge or die. Stanza 5. Kumorgi, he whose closing scene adorned the triumph of Eugene, when on Karlowitz's bloody plain, the last and mightiest of the slain, he sank, regretting not to die, but cursed the Christians' victory. Kumorgi, can his glory cease, that latest conqueror of Greece, till Christian hands to Greece restore the freedom Venice gave of yore? 100 years have rolled away since he refixed the Muslim's sway, and now he led the Mussulman, and gave the guidance of the van to Alp, who well repaid the trust by cities levelled with the dust, and proved by many a deed of death how firm his heart in novel faith. Stanza 6. The walls grew weak, and fast and hot against them poured the ceaseless shot, with unabating fury sent from battery to battlement, and thunder-like the pealing din rose from each heated culverin, and here and there some crackling dome was fired before the exploding bomb, And as the fabric sank beneath the shattering shell's volcanic breath, in red and wreathing columns flashed the flame, as loud the ruin crashed, or into countless meteors driven, its earth stars melted into heaven, whose clouds that day grew doubly dun, impervious to the hidden sun, with volumed smoke that slowly grew to one wide sky of sulphurous hue. Stanza 7. But not for vengeance long delayed, alone did Alp, the renegade, the Muslim warriors sternly teach his skill to pierce the promised breach. Within these walls a maid was pent, his hope would win without consent of that inexorable sire, whose heart refused him in its ire, when Alp, beneath his Christian name, her virgin hand aspired to claim. In happier mood and earlier time, while unimpeached for traitorous crime, gayest in gondola or hall, he glittered through the carnival, and tuned the softest serenade that ever on Adria's waters played at midnight to Italian maid. Stanza 8. And many deemed her heart was won, for sought by numbers, given to none, had young Francesca's hand remained still by the church's bonds unchained. And when the Adriatic bore Lanciotto to the Paynim shore, her wonted smiles were seen to fail, and pensive waxed the maid and pale, more constant at confessional, more rare at masque and festival, or seen at such with downcast eyes, which conquered hearts they ceased to prize. With listless look she seems to gaze, with humbler care her form arrays, her voice less lively in the song, her step though light less fleet among the pairs, on whom the morning's glance breaks yet unsated with the dance. Stanza 9. Sent by the state to guard the land, which wrested from the Muslim's hand, while Sobieski tamed his pride by Buda's wall and Danube's side, the chiefs of Venice wrung away from Patra to Euboea's bay, Minotti held in Corinth's towers the Doge's delegated powers, while yet the pitying eye of peace smiled over her long forgotten Greece. And ere that faithless truce was broke, which freed her from the unchristian yoke, with him his gentle daughter came, nor there since Menelaus's dame forsook her lord and land, to prove what woes await on lawless love, had fairer form adorned the shore than she the matchless stranger bore. Stanza 10. The wall is rent, the ruins yawn, and with tomorrow's earliest dawn, over the disjointed mass shall vault the foremost of the fierce assault. The bands are ranked, the chosen van of Tartar and of Mussulman, the full of hope misnamed forlorn, who hold the thought of death in scorn, and win their way with falchion's force, or pave the path with many a course, over which the following brave may rise, their stepping stone, the last who dies. Stanza 11. 'Tis midnight. On the mountains brown the cold round moon shines deeply down. Blue roll the waters, blue the sky spreads like an ocean hung on high, bespangled with those isles of light, so wildly, spiritually bright. Whoever gazed upon them shining, and turned to earth without repining, nor wished for wings to flee away and mix with their eternal ray. The waves on either shore lay there, calm, clear, and azure as the air, and scarce their foam The pebbles shook, but murmured meekly as the brook. The winds were pillowed on the waves, the banners drooped along their staves, and as they fell around them furling, above them shone the crescent curling, and that deep silence was unbroke, save where the watch his signal spoke, save where the steed neighed oft and shrill, and echo answered from the hill, and the wide hum of that wild host rustled like leaves from coast to coast, as rose the muezzin's voice in air, in midnight call to wonted prayer. It rose that chaunted mournful strain, like some lone spirits over the plain. 'Twas musical, but sadly sweet, such as when winds and harp strings meet, and take a long unmeasured tone to mortal minstrelsy unknown. It seemed to those within the wall a cry prophetic of their fall. It struck even the besieger's ear with something ominous and drear, an undefined and sudden thrill, which makes the heart a moment still, then beat with quicker pulse, ashamed of that strange sense its silence framed, such as a sudden passing bell wakes, though but for a stranger's knell. End of The Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 1 to 11. Recorded by Antipodean Writer at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. The Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 12 to 22. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recorded by Antipodean Writer at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. The Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 12 to 22. Stanza 12. The tent of Alp was on the shore, the sound was hushed, the prayer was o'er, the watch was set, the night round made, all mandates issued and obeyed. 'Tis but another anxious night, his pains the morrow may requite, with all revenge and love can pay in guerdon for their long delay. Few hours remain, for he hath need of rest, to nerve for many a deed of slaughter, but within his soul the thoughts like troubled waters roll. He stood alone among the host, not his the loud fanatic boast to plant the crescent over the cross, or risk a life with little loss, secure in paradise to be, by Houris loved immortally, nor his what burning patriots feel, the stern exaltedness of zeal profuse of blood, untired in toil, when battling on the parent soil. He stood alone, a renegade, against the country he betrayed. He stood alone amidst his band, without a trusted heart or hand. They followed him, for he was brave, and great the spoil he got and gave. They crouched to him, for he had skill to warp and wield the vulgar will. But still his Christian origin with them was little less than sin. They envied even the faithless fame he earned beneath a Muslim name, since he, their mightiest chief, had been in youth a bitter Nazarene. They did not know how pride can stoop, when baffled feelings withering droop. They did not know how hate can burn in hearts once changed from soft to stern, nor all the false and fatal zeal the convert of revenge can feel. He ruled them. Man may rule the worst by ever daring to be first. So lions over the jackal sway, the jackal points, he fells the prey, then on the vulgar yelling press, to gorge the relics of success. Stanza 13. His head grows fevered, and his pulse the quick successive throbs convulse in vain. From side to side he throws his form in courtship of repose, or if he dozed, a sound, a start, awoke him with a sunken heart. The turban on his hot brow pressed, the mail weighed lead-like on his breast, though oft and long beneath its weight upon his eyes had slumber sate, without or couch or canopy, except a rougher field and sky, than now might yield a warrior's bed, than now along the heaven was spread. He could not rest, he could not stay within his tent to wait for day, but walked him forth along the sand, where 1,000 sleepers strewed the strand. What pillowed them? And why should he more wakeful than the humblest be? Since more their peril, worse their toil, and yet they fearless dream of spoil, while he alone, where thousands passed, a night of sleep, perchance their last, in sickly vigil wandered on, and envied all he gazed upon. Stanza 14. He felt his soul become more light beneath the freshness of the night. Cool was the silent sky, though calm, and bathed his brow with airy balm. Behind the camp, before him lay, in many a winding creek and bay, Lepanto's gulf, and on the brow of Delphi's hill unshaken snow, high and eternal, such as shone through 1,000 summers brightly gone. Along the gulf, the mount, the climb, it will not melt like man to time. Tyrant and slave are swept away, less formed to wear before the ray, but that white veil, the lightest, frailest, which on the mighty mount thou hailest, while tower and tree are torn and rent, shines over its craggy battlement, in form a peak, in height a cloud, in texture like a hovering shroud. Thus high by parting freedom spread, as from her fond abode she fled, and lingered on the spot where long her prophet spirit spake in song. Oh, still her step at moments falters over withered fields and ruined altars, and fain would wake in souls too broken, by pointing to each glorious token, but vain her voice, till better days dawn in those yet remembered rays, which shone upon the Persian flying, and saw the Spartan smile in dying. Stanza 15. Not mindless of these mighty times was Alp, despite his flight and crimes, and through this night, as on he wandered, and over the past and present pondered, and thought upon the glorious dead, who there in better cause had bled, he felt how faint and feebly dim the fame that could accrue to him, who cheered the band and waved the sword, a traitor in a turbaned horde, and led them to the lawless siege, whose best success were sacrilege. Not so had those his fancy numbered, the chiefs whose dust around him slumbered, their phalanx marshalled on the plain, whose bulwarks were not then in vain. They fell devoted, but undying, their very gale the names seemed sighing. The waters murmured of their name, the woods were peopled with their fame. The silent pillar, lone and grey, claimed kindred with their sacred clay. Their spirits wrapped the dusky mountain, their memory sparkled over the fountain. The meanest rill, the mightiest river, rolled mingling with their fame forever. Despite of every yoke she bears, that land is glory's still and theirs. 'Tis still a watchword to the earth, when man would do a deed of worth. He points to Greece, and turns to tread so sanctioned on the tyrant's head. He looks to her, and rushes on, where life is lost or freedom 1. Stanza 16. Still by the shore Alp mutely mused, and wooed the freshness night diffused. There shrinks no ebb in that tideless sea, which changeless rolls eternally, so that wildest of waves in their angriest mood scarce break on the bounds of the land for a rood, and the powerless moon beholds them flow, heedless if she come or go, calm or high, in main or bay, on their course she hath no sway. The rock unworn its base doth bear, and looks over the surf, but it comes not there, and the fringe of the foam may be seen below, on the line that it left long ages ago, a smooth short space of yellow sand between it and the greener land. He wandered on along the beach till within the range of a carbine's reach of the leaguered wall, but they saw him not, or how could he scape from the hostile shot? Did traitors lurk in the Christians' hold, where their hands grown stiff, or their hearts waxed cold? I know not, in sooth, but from yonder wall there flashed no fire, and there hissed no ball, though he stood beneath the bastion's frown that flanked the seaward gate of the town, though he heard the sound and could almost tell the sullen words of the sentinel, as his measured step on the stone below clanked as he paced it to and fro, and he saw the lean dogs beneath the wall hold over the dead their carnival, gorging and growling over carcass and limb. They were too busy to bark at him. From a Tartar's skull they had stripped the flesh, as you peel the fig when its fruit is fresh, and their white tusks crunched over the whiter skull, as it slipped through their jaws when their edge grew dull, as they lazily mumbled the bones of the dead when they scarce could rise from the spot where they fed. So well had they broken a lingering fast with those who had fallen for that night's repast. And Alp knew by the turbans that rolled on the sand, the foremost of these were the best of his band. Crimson and green were the shawls of their wear, and each scalp had a single long tuft of hair. All the rest was shaven and bare. The scalps were in the wild dog's maw, the hair was tangled round his jaw. But close by the shore, on the edge of the gulf, there sat a vulture flapping a wolf, who had stolen from the hills, but kept away, scared by the dogs from the human prey. But he seized on his share of a steed that lay, picked by the birds on the bands of the bay. Stanza 17. Alp turned him from the sickening sight, never had shaken his nerves in fight, but he better could brook to behold the dying, deep in the tide of their warm blood lying, scorched with the death thirst and writhing in vain, than the perishing dead who are past all pain. There is something of pride in the perilous hour, whatever be the shape in which death may lower. For fame is there to say who bleeds, and honour's eye on daring deeds. But when all is past, it is humbling to tread over the weltering field of the tombless dead, and see worms of the earth and fowls of the air, beasts of the forest, all gathering there, all regarding man as their prey, all rejoicing in his decay. Stanza 18. There is a temple in ruin stands, fashioned by long forgotten hands, 2 or 3 columns and many a stone, marble and granite with grass overgrown, Out upon time, it will leave no more of the things to come than the things before. Out upon time, who forever will leave but enough of the past for the future to grieve. Over that which hath been, and over that which must be, what we have seen, our sons shall see. Remnants of things that have passed away, fragments of stone reared by creatures of clay. Stanza 19. He sate him down at a pillar's base, and passed his hand athwart his face, like one in dreary musing mood. Declining was his attitude, his head was drooping on his breast, fevered, throbbing, and oppressed, and over his brow, so downward bent, oft his beating fingers went, hurriedly as you may see your own run over the ivory key, ere the measured tone is taken by the chords you would awaken. There he sate all heavily, as he heard the night wind sigh. Was it the wind through some hollow stone sent that soft and tender moan? He lifted his head, and he looked on the sea, but it was unrippled as glass may be. He looked on the long grass, it waved not a blade. How was that gentle sound conveyed? He looked to the banners, each flag lay still, so did the leaves on Cithæron's hill, and he felt not a breath come over his cheek. What did that sudden sound bespeak? He turned to the left. Is he sure of sight? There sate a lady, youthful and bright. Stanza 20. He started up with more of fear than if an armed foe were near. God of my fathers, what is here? Who art thou, and wherefore sent so near a hostile armament? His trembling hands refused to sign the cross he deemed no more divine. He had resumed it in that hour, but conscience wrung away the power. He gazed, he saw, he knew the face of beauty and the form of grace. It was Francesca by his side, the maid who might have been his bride. The rose was yet upon her cheek, but mellowed with a tenderer streak. Where was the play of her soft lips fled? Gone was the smile that enlivened their red. The ocean's calm within their view beside her eye had less of blue. But like that cold wave it stood still, and its glance, though clear, was chill. Around her form a thin robe twining, naught concealed her bosom shining. Through the parting of her hair, floating darkly downward there, her rounded arm showed white and bare, and ere yet she made reply, once she raised her hand on high. It was so wan and transparent of hue, you might have seen the moon shine through. Stanza 21. I come from my rest to him I love best, that I may be happy and he may be blessed. I have passed the guards, the gate, the wall, sought thee in safety through foes and all. 'Tis said the lion will turn and flee from a maid in the pride of her purity, and the power on high that can shield the good, thus from the tyrant of the wood hath extended its mercy to guard me as well from the hands of the leaguering infidel. I come, and if I come in vain, never, oh never, we meet again. Thou hast done a fearful deed in falling away from thy father's creed, but dash that turban to earth and sign the sign of the cross, and forever be mine. Wring the black drop from thy heart, and tomorrow unites us no more to part. And where should our bridal couch be spread? In the midst of the dying and the dead. For tomorrow we give to the slaughter and flame the sons and the shrines of the Christian name. None save thou and thine, I've sworn, shall be left upon the morn, but thee will I bear to a lovely spot, where our hands shall be joined and our sorrow forgot. There thou yet shalt be my bride, when once again I've quelled the pride of Venice, and her hated race have felt the arm they would debase, scourge with a whip of scorpions those whom vice and envy made my foes. Upon his hand she laid her own. Light was the touch, but it thrilled to the bone, and shot a chillness to his heart, which fixed him beyond the power to start. Though slight was that grasp, so mortal cold, he could not loose him from its hold, but never did clasp of one so dear strike on the pulse with such feeling of fear, as those thin fingers, long and white, froze through his blood by their touch that night. The feverish glow of his brow was gone, and his heart sank so still that it felt like stone, as he looked on the face and beheld its hue, so deeply changed from what he knew. Fair but faint, without the ray of mind that made each feature play, like sparkling waves on a sunny day, and her motionless lips lay still as death, and her words came forth without her breath, and there rose not a heave over her bosom's swell, and there seemed not a pulse in her veins to dwell. Though her eye shone out, yet the lids were fixed, and the glance that it gave was wild and unmixed with aught of change, as the eyes may seem of the restless who walk in a troubled dream, like the figures on arms that gloomily glare, stirred by the breath of the wintry air, so seen by the dying lamp's fitful light, lifeless but lifelike, and awful to sight, as they seem through the dimness about to come down from the shadowy wall where their images frown, fearfully flitting to and fro as the gusts on the tapestry come and go. If not for love of me be given, thus much then for the love of heaven. Again I say that turban tear from off thy faithless brow, and swear thine injured country's sons to spare, or thou art lost, and never shalt see not earth that's past, but heaven or me. If this thou dost accord, albeit a heavy doom 'tis thine to meet, that doom shall half absolve thy sin, and mercy's gate may receive thee within. But pause one moment more, and take the curse of him thou didst forsake, and look once more to heaven, and see its love for ever shut from thee. There is a light cloud by the moon, 'tis passing, and will pass full soon, if by the time its vapoury sail hath ceased her shaded orb to veil, thy heart within thee is not changed, then God and man are both avenged. Dark will thy doom be, darker still thine immortality of ill. Alp looked to heaven, and saw on high the sign she spake of in the sky, but his heart was swollen and turned aside by deep interminable pride. This first false passion of his breast rolled like a torrent over the rest. He sue for mercy, he dismayed by wild words of a timid maid, he wronged by Venice, vow to save her sons devoted to the grave? No, though that cloud were thunder's worst, and charged to crush him, let it burst. He looked upon it earnestly, without an accent of reply. He watched it passing, it is flown, full on his eye the clear moon shone, and thus he spake: whatever my fate, I am no changeling, 'tis too late. The reed in storms may bow and quiver, then rise again, the tree must shiver. What Venice made me I must be, her foe in all save love to thee. But thou art safe, oh fly with me! He turned, but she is gone. Nothing is there but the column stone. Hath she sunk in the earth, or melted in air? He saw not, he knew not, but nothing is there. Stanza 22. The night is past, and shines the sun, as if that morn were a jocund one. Lightly and brightly breaks away the morning from her mantle grey, and the noon will look on a sultry day. Hark to the trump and the drum, and the mournful sound of the barbarous horn, and the flap of the banners that flit as they're borne, and the neigh of the steed, and the multitude's hum, and the clash and the shout. They come! They come! The horse-tails are plucked from the ground, and the sword from its sheath, and they form, and but wait for the word. Tartar and Spahi and Turcoman, strike your tents and throng to the van. Mount ye, spur ye, scur the plain, that the fugitive may flee in vain when he breaks from the town, and none escape, aged or young in the Christian shape, while your fellows on foot in a fiery mass blood stain the breach through which they pass. The steeds are all bridled and snort to the rein. Curved is each neck and flowing each mane. White is the foam of their champ on the bit. The spears are uplifted, the matches are lit. The cannon are pointed and ready to roar, and crush the wall they have crumbled before. Forms in his phalanx each Janizar, Alp at their head, his right arm is bare, so is the blade of his scimitar. The Khan and the Pachas are all at their post, the Vizier himself at the head of the host. When the culveron's signal is fired, then on, leave not in Corinth a living one, a priest at her altars, a chief in her halls, a hearth in her mansions, a stone on her walls. God and the Prophet, Allah-hu, up to the skies with that wild halloo. There the breach lies for passage, the ladder to scale, and your hands on your sabres, and how should ye fail? He who first downs with the red cross may crave his heart's dearest wish, let him ask it and have. Thus uttered Kamorgi, the dauntless vizier. The reply was the brandish of sabre and spear, and the shout of fierce thousands in joyous ire. Silence! Hark to the signal! Fire! End of The Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 12 to 22. Recorded by Antipodean Writer at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. The Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 23 to 33. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recorded by Antipodean Writer at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. The Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 23 to 33. Stanza 23. As the wolves that headlong go on the stately buffalo, though with fiery eyes and angry roar, and hoofs that stamp and horns that gore, he tramples on earth or tosses on high the foremost who rush on his strength but to die. Thus against the wall they went, thus the first were backward bent. Many a bosom sheathed in brass strewed the earth like broken glass, shivered by the shot that tore the ground whereon they moved no more. Even as they fell in files they lay, like the mower's grass at the close of day, when his work is done on the levelled plain. Such was the fall of the foremost slain. Stanza 24. As the spring tides with heavy plash from the cliffs invading dash, huge fragments sapped by the ceaseless flow, till white and thundering down they go, like the avalanche's snow on the alpine vales below. Thus at length outbreathed and worn, Corinth's sons were downward borne by the long and oft renewed charge of the Moslem multitude. In firmness they stood, and in masses they fell, heaped by the host of the infidel, hand to hand and foot to foot. Nothing there save death was mute, stroke and thrust and flash and cry for quarter or for victory. Mingle there with the volleying thunder, which makes the distant cities wonder how the sounding battle goes, if with them or for their foes, if they must mourn or may rejoice in that annihilating voice which pierces the deep hills through and through with an echo dread and new. You might have heard it on that day over Salamis and Megara. We have heard the hearers say, even unto Piraeus Bay. Stanza 25. From the point of encountering blades to the hilt, sabres and swords with blood were gilt, but the rampart is won, and the spoil begun, and all but the after carnage done. Shriller shrieks now mingling come from within the plundered dome. Hark to the haste of flying feet that splash in the blood of the slippery street. But here and there, where vantage ground against the foe may still be found, desperate groups of 12 or 10 make a pause and turn again, with banded backs against the wall, fiercely stand or fighting fall. There stood an old man, his hairs were white, but his veteran arm was full of might. So gallantly bore he the brunt of the fray. The dead before him on that day in a semicircle lay. Still he combated, unwounded, though retreating, unsurrounded. Many a scar of former fight lurked beneath his corslet bright, but of every wound his body bore, each and all had been taken before. Though aged he was, so iron of limb, few of our youth could cope with him, and the foes whom he singly kept at bay outnumbered his thin hairs of silver grey. From right to left his sabre swept, many an Othman mother wept, sons that were unborn when dipped his weapon first in Moslem gore. Each his years could count a score, of all he might have been the sire, who fell that day beneath his ire. For sonless left, long years ago, his wrath made many a childless foe, and since the day when in the strait his only boy had met his fate, his parents' iron hand did doom more than a human hecatomb, if shades by carnage be appeased. Patroclus' spirit less was pleased than his, Menoetes' son who died, where Asia's bounds and ours divide. Buried he lay, where thousands before for thousands of years were inhumed on the shore. What of them is left to tell, where they lie and how they fell? Not a stone on their turf, nor a bone in their graves, but they live in the verse that immortally saves. Stanza 26. Hark to the Allah shout, a band of the Mussulman, bravest and best is at hand. Their leader's nervous arm is bare, swifter to smite and never to spare. Unclothed to the shoulder it waves them on, thus in the fight is he ever known. Others a gaudier garb may show, to tempt the spoil of the greedy foe. Many a hand's on a richer hilt, but none on a steel more ruddily gilt. Many a loftier turban may wear, Alp is but known by the white arm bare. Look through the thick of the fight, 'tis there. There is not a standard on that shore so well advanced the ranks before. There is not a banner in Moslem war will lure the Delhis half so far. It glances like a falling star wherever that mighty arm is seen. The bravest be or late have been, there the craven cries for quarter, vainly to the vengeful Tartar, or the hero silent lying, scorns to yield a groan in dying, mustering his last feeble blow against the nearest levelled foe, though faint beneath the mutual wound, grappling on the gory ground. Stanza 27. Still the old man stood erect, and Alp's career a moment checked. Yield thee, Minotti, quarter take, for thine own, thy daughter's sake. Never, renegado, never, though the life of thy gift would last forever. Francesca, O my promised bride, must she too perish by thy pride? She is safe. Where? In heaven, from whence thy traitor soul is driven, far from thee and undefiled. Grimly then Minotti smiled, as he saw Alp staggering bow before his words as with a blow. O God, when died she? Yesternight. Nor weep I for her spirit's flight. None of my pure race shall be slaves to Mahomet and thee. Come on! That challenge is in vain. Alp's already with the slain. While Minotti's words were wreaking more revenge in bitter speaking than his falchion's point had found, had the time allowed to wound from within the neighbouring porch of a long defended church, where the last and desperate few would the failing fight renew. The sharp shot dashed Alp to the ground, ere an eye could view the wound that crashed through the brain of the infidel. Round he spun and down he fell, a flash like fire within his eyes blazed as he bent no more to rise, and then eternal darkness sunk through all the palpitating trunk. Naught of life left, save a quivering where his limbs were slightly shivering. They turned him on his back, his breast and brow were stained with gore and dust, and through his lips the lifeblood oozed from its deep veins lately loosed. But in his pulse there was no throb, nor on his lips one dying sob. Sigh nor word nor struggling breath heralded his way to death. Ere his very thought could pray, unannealed he passed away, without a hope from mercy's aid, to the last a renegade. Stanza 28. Fearfully the yell arose of his followers and his foes, these in joy, in fury those, then again in conflict mixing, clashing swords and spears transfixing, interchanged the blow and thrust, hurling warriors in the dust, street by street and foot by foot. Still Minotti dares dispute the latest portion of the land left beneath his high command, with him aiding heart and hand the remnant of his gallant band. Still the church is tenable, whence issued late the fated ball that half avenged the city's fall, when Alp her fierce assailant fell. Thither bending sternly back, they leave before a bloody track, and with their faces to the foe, dealing wounds with every blow. The chief and his retreating train join to those within the fane. There they yet may breathe a while, sheltered by the massy pile. Stanza 29. Brief breathing time, the turbaned host with added ranks and raging boast press onwards with such strength and heat, their numbers balk their own retreat, for narrow the way that led to the spot where still the Christians yielded not, and the foremost, if fearful, may vainly try through the massy column to turn and fly. They perforce must do or die. They die, but ere their eyes could close, avengers over their bodies rose, fresh and furious, fast they fill the ranks unthinned, though slaughtered still, and faint the weary Christians wax before the still renewed attacks, and now the Ottomans gain the gate, still resists its iron weight, and still, all deadly aimed and hot, from every crevice comes the shot, from every shattered window pour the volleys of the sulphurous shower. But the portal wavering grows, and weak the iron yields, the hinges creak, it bends, it falls, and all is o'er. Lost Corinth may resist no more. Stanza 30. Darkly, sternly, and all alone, Menotti stood over the altar stone. Madonna's face upon him shone, painted in heavenly hues above, with eyes of light and looks of love, and placed upon that holy shrine, to fix our thoughts on things divine. When pictured there, we kneeling see her and the boy God on her knee, smiling sweetly on each prayer to heaven, as if to waft it there. Still she smiled, even now she smiles, though slaughter streams along her aisles. Menotti lifted his aged eye, and made the sign of a cross with a sigh, then seized a torch which blazed thereby, and still he stood, while with steel and flame, inward and onward the Mussulman came. Stanza 31. The vaults beneath the mosaic stone contained the dead of ages gone. Their names were on the graven floor, but now illegible with gore. The carved crests and curious hues, the varied marble's veins diffuse, were smeared and slippery, stained and strown, with broken swords and helms overthrown. There were dead above, and the dead below lay cold in many a coffined row. You might see them piled in sable state by a pale light through a gloomy grate, but war had entered their dark caves, and stored along the vaulted graves her sulphurous treasures, thickly spread in masses by the fleshless dead. Here throughout the siege had been the Christians' chiefest magazine. To these a late formed train now led, Menotti's last and stern resource against the foe's overwhelming force. Stanza 32. The foe came on, and few remain to strive, and those must strive in vain, for lack of further lives to slake. The thirst of vengeance now awake, with barbarous blows they gash the dead, and lop the already lifeless head, and fell the statues from their niche, and spoil the shrines of offerings rich, and from each other's rude hands wrest the silver vessels saints had blessed. To the high altar on they go, oh but it made a glorious show. On its table still behold the cup of consecrated gold, massy and deep, a glittering prize. Brightly it sparkles to plunderers' eyes. That morn it held the holy wine, converted by Christ to his blood so divine, which his worshippers drank at the break of day, to shrive their souls ere they joined in the fray. Still a few drops within it lay, and round the sacred table glow 12 lofty lamps in splendid row, from the purest metal cast, a spoil the richest and the last. Stanza 33. So near they came, the nearest stretched to grasp the spoil he almost reached, when old Menotti's hand touched with the torch the train. 'Tis fired! Spire vaults the shrine, the spoil, the slain, the turbaned victors, the Christian band, all that of living or dead remain, hurled on high with the shivered fane, in one wild roar expired. The shattered town, the walls thrown down, the waves a moment backward bent, the hills that shake, although unrent, as if an earthquake passed. The thousand shapeless things all driven in cloud and flame athwart the heaven by that tremendous blast, proclaimed the desperate conflict, or on that too long afflicted shore, up to the sky like rockets go all that mingled there below. Many a tall and goodly man, scorched and shriveled to a span, when he fell to earth again. Like a cinder strewed the plain, down the ashes shower like rain. Some fell in the gulf, which received the sprinkles with 1,000 circling wrinkles. Some fell on the shore, but far away, scattered over the isthmus lay. Christian or Moslem, which be they? Let their mothers see and say. When in cradled rest they lay, and each nursing mother smiled on the sweet sleep of her child, little deemed she such a day would rend those tender limbs away. Not the matrons that them bore could discern their offspring more. That one moment left no trace more of human form or face, save a scattered scalp or bone, and down came blazing rafters strown around, and many a falling stone, deeply dinted in the clay, all blackened there and reeking lay. All the living things that heard that deadly earth shock disappeared. The wild birds flew, the wild dogs fled, and howling left the unburied dead. The camels from their keepers broke, the distant steer forsook the yoke. The nearer steed plunged over the plain, and burst his girth and tore his rein. The bullfrog's note from out the marsh, deep-mouthed arose and doubly harsh. The wolves yelled on the caverned hill, where echo rolled in thunder still. The jackal's troop in gathered cry bayed from afar complainingly, with a mixed and mournful sound, like crying babe and beaten hound. With sudden wing and ruffled breast, the eagle left his rocky nest, and mounted nearer to the sun. The clouds beneath him seemed so dun, their smoke assailed his startled beak, and made him higher soar and shriek. Thus was Corinth lost and won. End of The Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron, stanzas 23 to 33. End of The Siege of Corinth by Lord Byron. Recorded by Antipodean Writer at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com.